Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in my newly founded attempt to try and get back to more champion guides, we're going to be discussing Attuma, his uses offensively, his pros and cons, as well as his defensive value and defensive counters. So let's start with a quick breakdown of what he's good at, and then we're going to get into fight examples and some more specific abilities. So we can start with the pros offensively of Attuma, because a lot of people do not know that he can be quite a capable attacker under specific circumstances. His problem primarily is the matchup necessity. Quite often in this game we see champions like that, where in theory you do have very good amount of potential, but then there are some impracticalities either in playstyle or just lack of very common great matchups, so to speak. But when time is right, Attuma can be one of the most satisfying champions to play for some of the Autumn of Agony or Eternity of Pain type of challenges, for instance. So he has great true accuracy access. So once you spam a couple of level 1s, or later on in the fight you just spam one level 1 and your true accuracy is going to last absolutely forever. And it's quite easy to get to. So another huge upside of Attuma is that his abilities never fail. Because if any ability would lower, then it gets increased instead. So it means that, yeah, under no nodes ever, his abilities will fail. Then he obviously does have great debuff purification, great unstoppable uptime. Basically, you can maintain 100% unstoppable when needed or close to it. Low start damage, that would be at the cons, by the way. My bad on that one. We're going to delete that one from the pros. That is definitely a con. So, but let's get to it. So, he's a high tempo reliant character. His entire playstyle relies on being able to drop the heavy attacks when you can and when you need to, and spamming as many special attacks in order to maintain hydration, increase amount of concussion, and so on and so forth. If you slow him down, if he's forced to dance around specific nodes, he immediately becomes significantly less effective. And the second big con is fairly small amount of great matchups. It's just similar case to something like Bait Ray Bill, for instance. On paper, when he came out, he had the damage, had fairly large list of abilities, he looked very great. But then in reality, you don't really need him. Because, you know, he's primarily focused on shock and destroying some tech champions, and then it turns out that, you know, portion of the tech champions are immune to the shock, and then there aren't that many great defenders. It's kind of similar with Attuma. If you take a look at, for instance, Science class, then let's name a couple of, you know, more dominant defenders in Science class. Against Photon, you apply debuffs to yourself, so Photon's always going to ramp up faster, plus it's not easy to parry heavy with Attuma, so that's a mess. Against the Thing, for instance, once you start hitting hard enough, you know, there's nothing really helping you that much in the Thing matchup either. And then somebody like Jessica Jones, again, you debuff yourself, you ramp up Jessica Jones faster, and it's still, you know, not a great fight. And those are, you know, some of the best Science defenders that he's meant to counter as a class at large. And similar story goes in, you know, a lot of different areas. He just doesn't have that many great matchups. And then another thing that definitely is against Attuma is because of his reliance on heavy attacks, and often your necessity to drop multiples of those heavy attacks, you not being able to do so efficiently if Stun Your Grandmaster is active, can be very annoying. Yes, if opponent parries and stuns you, then it can work out, but if they just, you know, block your heavy with the Stun Your Ground Mastery, then you can get smacked in the face afterwards. And yeah, the second thing is that he is ultimately a ramp up damage type champion, and that in this game inherently comes with weaknesses, because typically most of the game modes are largely focused on champions that do have access to the damage very early on, and Attuma is just not one of those. So defensive value, I would call him as a medium-high defender, relatively high. He's one of those champions that where you do have a counter, you can steamroll. If you don't, you will struggle a lot and it's borderline impossible. So when countered, absolutely vanilla fight. There's nothing hard about fighting Attuma with a good counter. Outside of the fact that you can't necessarily parry stun him with most champions. But even that, you know, some champs can get around with quite easily, like Negasonic, for instance. And then in most cases, he's basically stun immune. You know, passive stuns will still work, but yeah, that's kind of helpful. So often will mean some sort of block damage if you do want to be safe, or opponents have to, you know, land all their intercepts and risk getting intercepted. Against Attuma, it's also very well known that fights can get out of hand very fast. And on top of it all, if the fight gets prolonged to a point where he throws multitudes of special attacks, he's going to go unstoppable, and that is going to be a whole different kind of worm. So unless you're able to nuke and finish him fast, a lot of problems may occur later in the fight. And another great thing is that, relatively speaking, he doesn't have that large amount of counters in the game, even though it is ever so increasing, and a lot of those champions are unfortunately, you know, relatively meta popular. Like Negasonic is fairly popular, like Shuri still extremely popular. Onslaught is one of the most meta dominant champions and is a great counter to Attuma. So yeah, he's quite unlucky in the fact that a lot of the champions that do counter him almost, you know, perfectly also happen to be very meta relevant champions and are almost ever so present. Right. So the counters, ways to counter him, typically will be non-contact attacks. That will include champions like Onslaught, Negasonic, Shuri. Damage reflection, it will be Shuri and newly released Dazzler, if awakened, as well as champions who nullify the Thorn's damage back. There will be like Omega Red and Gambit. And another, you know, when it comes to Battlegrounds and Alliance War, you can always also just, you know, accept some health loss and nuke him fast. So let's first of all take him for a spin offensively a little bit here, and let's shift to a fight screen. So I do have a rank 3 SIG 200 Attuma. SIG is quite important, helpful for him. The higher the better. Effectively, the higher the SIG he has, the better chance, or at SIG 200, the guaranteed chance that he will start with 2 concussions at least on him, which means he's just going to have a faster ramp up, as well as he will be dealing more damage back with his Tolkien skin. And here we can see that just about every fight you will want to start with dropping a level 1 and then dropping several heavy attacks to convert your hydration into concussions. And obviously the more concussions you have, the more efficiently you will be able to do so. Level 1 also gives you true accuracy, and then you can already pretty much go for level 2. With lower ranked or lower SIG Attumas, you might need to throw another level 1. And here, you know, this is actually pretty much how long would a Battlegrounds fight last, because, you know, that is about 300 damage dealt already at this point here. And here we can see that I'm spamming heavy attacks yet again to get rid of my hydration in order to get my concussions. Throw your level 2, you're going to get all your 20 hydrations easily. And the kind of trick to get best out of Attuma offensively is to actually do not convert your hydrations immediately once you start hitting the 20 mark, because then you get the precision and then you're unstoppable and you can be uber aggressive, and that helps you deal a lot of damage. So typically once you do get 20 hydrations, you want to be super aggressive until they drop off to 18, and then you start spamming your heavy attacks to convert those 18 hydrations into concussions, and, you know, kind of rinse and repeat basically. The more concussions you have, the easier you get your hydrations, and the more cruelty passives you're going to have. And that's kind of the cycle. You typically want to start it all off by, you know, throwing a single level 1. In some fights where true accuracy might be important, you might want to drop a couple more level 1s because, you know, true accuracy, you know, shuts down a wave and can be tremendously useful in some matchups. And then once you kind of make sure that your true accuracy duration will be covered long enough for a while, you just go back to your level 2s. That also means that any metas, matchups, and nodes that give Attuma extra power make him significantly more effective. Like offensively, if you get to throw more special attacks than normal, that means Attuma is going to ramp up faster and is going to have significantly more damage. because you're going to be able to get to more concussions. And defensively, it's kind of similar to that. The more power he gains, the more specials he's going to throw, the more hydration he's going to have, and the more likely that he will get to go unstoppable, and then he becomes extremely difficult to fight. So here we saw where I used the durations of my hydration whilst I was unstoppable to be super aggressive, and then I actually got smacked a bit. And here I make a tiny bit of a mistake. I actually wanted to throw another level 2 and then go for my level 3, but this will serve as a good showcase for longer fights. When you're about ready to close out the fight, you can always go for a level 3, and the more concussions you have, the more bleeds you will inflict on your opponent. As we can see here, it was like 28 bleeds, and they are ticking for very significant amounts of damage, like 13k a tick. They're lasting quite a while, and that was nearly dead. If I threw my special 3 a bit later, like if I reversed it, another level 2 and then a level 3, this fight already would have been over, and that would prove that Attuma can actually be extremely competent long fight champion. Dare I even say better or as good as, let's say, somebody like Sentry? And the big difference in between these champions is that Attuma is probably more usable in short fights than Sentry is, and he's 1,000,000% a better defender. And overall better champion, I guess you could say. But we can see that Attuma can completely shred fights like that. Offensively, if we are looking for some of the strong suits for Attuma, for instance, somebody like Quicksilver, because whenever opponent does evade and Attuma is under bar power, he actually goes unstoppable for a bit, and then once you do throw your level 1, you get your true accuracy buffs, passive, sorry. And that means that, you can completely shut down a Wade in a matchup like this very easily. I do make, some mistakes here or there, but the point is that, Attuma is very, very, very effective against a Wade in general. So I throw this special, we already get 5 true accuracies. I can convert those little debuffs from Quicksilver, the whiplashes, into my own personal debuffs as well. With the heavy attacks, and now he can't wade. Here, constant willpower healing. I'm unstoppable. Completely shut that fight down. But again, it's not necessarily most meaningful matchup, I would say. Here we have something like Spiderham. Similar case, you can shut down their wade if you have to, and then any debuffs that you get from the guy, you can, if you get taunted or you get power sting on you, you can just get rid of that immediately, extremely easily. It doesn't have any consequences. In fact, it kind of fuels you up as well. And here we go. So that would be like a picture-perfect matchup for Attuma. Then moving on to another one. Some more generic matchups. As long as you can maintain levels of aggression, will work out fine for Attuma. Somebody that you might fight quite frequently, Sasquatch, for instance. There's nothing inherently great for Attuma that helps you counter Sasquatch, but if you do need to, obviously Attuma is perfectly capable of ramping up and dealing enough damage to outdamage Sasquatch. He doesn't rely on a lot of buffs, therefore you do not fear MD all that much in general. And the key point here is still managing to be aggressive. And here, once you have dropped your level 1, level 2, we can see that you're starting to deal some solid damage, even with a relatively tiny Attuma by comparison. And then we're gonna start converting our hydrations back to concussions and gonna go for another level 2 and just gonna have a fairly good time overall. Obviously taking some block damage. The block damage in these examples is exaggerated. Attuma is not that squishy, it's just that we're using under-ranked champion. But point is, we do have the cruelties now, we do have the precision passive, so we're actually going to be doing a large amount of damage. That unstoppable also can let you get, easy openings, guaranteed intercept, stuff like that. All the utility that comes from, having great unstoppable uptime. And another matchup that, many people might not necessarily think about, and it's not the greatest counter, but thanks to true accuracy and the fact that his damage is not necessarily super reliant on crits, you can actually use Attuma as a counter to Red Skull in a pinch. Because not only you have true accuracy, which means that you will forever and always be able to attack Red Skull. You can ignore the auto block. You also have the red numbers from his Talcon skin, which means I should have thrown my level 1 there. Which means that, you know, not critting is not a deal breaker, because you do have, you know, secondary damage source here. And the third thing is your stuns will never fail, because Attuma's ability accuracy can never be lowered or reduced ever. And with that, you basically, you know, don't have to worry about Red Skull's anti-stun properties. And the entire fight is, just bait out level 1s. You can punish them with heavy attacks when you have to. You can go for full combos. Just make sure you do have enough of true accuracy active. And he's actually quite handy Red Skull counter. I don't think too many people know that, but can be useful. As we can see here, once you are ramped up already, have enough concussions and hydrations, you do fairly decent amount of damage. And again, you do not need to worry about the auto block and Red Skull's, you know, standard ability reduction. Then again, where true accuracy comes into play, somebody like Iron Infinity War, fairly decent option here, because again, true accuracy, something that you can utilize to bypass the auto block, and then once you ramp up, you can nuke down Iron Man Infinity War quite well. Again, not an ideal counter, not the fastest one in, you know, battleground scenarios or alliance war, but, you know, I can certainly see this being quite viable in a pinch situation, or in alliance war matchups where purifying debuffs at the same time could be, for instance, a requirement. So here we can see that he has his armor ups. You just blitz right through that. Another super important thing to know is Talcon skin and damage reflection and hydration. So whenever Attuma is throwing special attacks, that is kind of like one big problem with Attuma on defense. If you do not nuke him fast enough, aside from damage reflection, he will also go passively unstoppable. He's gonna gain immunities to the Incinerate, I believe. But that's also a way to counter him. For champions in longer fights, you are borderline required to have access to Shock or Incinerate in order to keep the hydration low. Or you will end up having to parry him a lot, which he will then shrug off and get a ton of concussions. Somebody like, Gambit can get away with it if you do negate the damage you take. But that, again, typically is the point where these fights get out of hand. So how do we counter? Obviously, we do have like Negasonic. She's built to be able to counter pretty much the entire skill class. So with her, you can safely parry Attuma. It's a passive stun, so you do not need to worry about him shrugging it off. You have access to a ton of Incinerates, so we can see that every time Attuma gets incinerated, he loses his hydrations, and you're making no contact on your hits. So you take no damage back. So Negasonic is picture perfect counter. And besides that, we obviously have Shuri as well. Ebony Maw is quite good, for instance. Havoc is a decent counter in most cases because his mediums and heavy attacks make no contact. It's not the greatest or fastest, and it's a bit tricky fight, but you can do this fight extremely well with Havoc, pending, meta allowing, because you need to keep in mind that his special attacks, a couple of those hits still make contact, so you do want to be careful. But you can utilize champions with non-contact mediums, for instance, like Nova, like Havoc, like Ebony Maw. They can work decently well. The problem with these counters, like Nova, like Havoc, will start when Attuma is gonna have enough special attacks. So here I'm actually kind of purposely not trying to speed up the fight, just to show what is also a potential danger here. Because again, some more specials here and he's going to be unstoppable, and that's going to be a big problem, right? So I'm going to drop my heavy attack just to show, what Havoc can do in this matchup. And I could have played it better. Obviously, the best way would have been pretty much to build up to level 3 here. But he's at 18 charges now. Means one more special attack from him, and he's going to go unstoppable. and there's going to be absolutely nothing I can really do about it. Now I can parry him at this point. That's going to give him more concussions, and that's going to make him ramp up later on faster. And this is the way to get rid of Unstoppable, but you can only, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. You get rid of the Unstoppable, but see how much couple of hits damage me back. And the reason for that is because he had a lot of concussions. So unless you do have access to Shock and Incinerate, that is something that you need to keep in mind. You can get rid of the Unstoppable against Attuma, but it comes with a downside, which again you might be able to counter with non-contact hits, but messing up against him is going to be much harder. Every time he's going to throw special attacks, he's going to go Unstoppable again, so on and so forth. So Attuma is really best to be nuked or countered perfectly. Here, it's an option, but this match was here to primarily show how if he does have the hydrations, you can incinerate him and get rid of them. Each hit here gets rid of the hydration. This means a great matchup against the non-contact thing, or damage reduction or mitigation is kind of key against Attuma. Alright, so that for most part has been Attuma guide, how to use him and how to counter him. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will catch you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about